everyone, and welcome to another episode of On the Dotcast. Today, I'm joined by Shauna, one of our fantastic data journalists, and we're going to be talking all about GLP-1 drugs, which takes me a while to say sometimes. Essentially, weight loss jabs. We're going to be diving into the data, seeing what they're about, seeing how consumers are reacting to them. So let's get stuck in. Shauna, welcome.
Thanks so much for having me.
So you have gathered a ton of data on this audience and the types of people who kind of use GLP-1 drugs. Let's just kind of give a top line overview about, what the drugs are before we dive into them.
Yeah, sure. So GLP stands for glucagon peptide. I might have said that wrong and offended scientists everywhere. But basically, it's a hormone that's released after you eat. And so by injecting it into your body, you're basically saying, I'm full, I'm satisfied, I don't need to eat anymore, which in theory quiets all of that food noise that so many of us experience. Yeah. But I think the main thing that people tend to take away from weight loss drugs in their story is the fact that they weren't initially first used for weight loss. Because they stimulate insulin, they started out as a treatment for type 2 diabetes.
Yeah, I actually wanted to talk a bit about the timelines for that because they shifted, right? So I think they were first approved as a drug in 2005, and then they were first approved for weight loss specifically in 2014.
Yeah, it's later than you, or earlier than you might have thought, but...
Yeah, it's also in the world of drugs, medical drugs, it's quite new, right? So for something to be this popular, this kind of nascently in its origins of, okay, you can now use GLP-1 drugs for weight loss. I mean, that was only just over 10 years ago?
Yeah.
Just over. So I personally only started hearing about them when did I first start hearing about them?
2021?
2021, maybe even 2022. They definitely, the insert famous name here, rumors were starting of so many people have lost weight, or, all of Hollywood all of a sudden was overnight stick thin.
Yeah.
So it's quite a short time span, right? So from kind of coming into the world to getting approved to kind of being in quite rapid circulation. So let's talk about what happened in that short time span, because a lot of the stuff that I've been reading is popularity is increasing. And actually there was stories at one point that they were so popular for weight loss that diabetics themselves couldn't get them, because that's what originally they were for. Originally it's a diabetic treatment. And it was, okay, this is something that can also work for weight loss. Mm-hmm. And so because the demand was so high for that, we was finding that diabetics themselves, there was a short supply, right? So is that kind of sold out, backed up in our data anywhere? What does GWI data say?
Yeah, sure. So for the last 3 years, around about then, we've tracked awareness, interest, and usage of weight loss jabs. Mm-hmm. And all three of those measures have climbed. So the share of Americans saying they're aware of weight loss jabs has gone from something crazy like 44% to over 90%, which, makes sense, right? Most people should have heard of them by now. And then on the usage front, 7% of Americans said they'd used them when we asked in early 2025, which may not sound like a lot, but that had grown by 47% year on year. Yeah. So users are a minority, but they're a fast growing one. And I think the most interesting thing is that interest has grown by 26% in the US year on year. So I think that really sends a clear signal that we're not anywhere near this market saturation point just yet.
Yeah, that's really interesting. We talked a lot about the US, and I even mentioned kind of Hollywood in my intro. I'd be really interested to know, because I think the US is quite a very different landscape, especially its pharma companies. They do a lot of direct to consumer advertising, sales. It's a very different market. Mm-hmm. So what does this trend look like on a global scale?
Ooh, good point. So while interest and usage does vary quite a lot by market, I definitely wouldn't say it's just the US. Before I go on, if you had to guess, which markets would you say were most or least interested in weight loss jabs?
Definitely the US.
Yeah.
I'd say the UK, because I'm pretty sure you can buy it in supermarkets now. I probably would avoid certain like European countries. Like, I feel like Italy would be quite low down. I don't know why. Maybe just because I feel like the kind of vibe towards food is a lot more chilled and like it's, you know, it's much more about like enjoying food. And I just culturally, I don't think that suppressing appetite, from what I understand from Italian consumers, is, you know,
It's kind of annoying. They're pretty good guesses. They wanted to come in and be like, "Oh my god, I'm surprising you."
I should have thrown you a curveball.
No, so yeah, Brazilians and Australians kind of share the top of the leaderboard with
Australia,
with America. Yeah,
wow.
So that's pretty high up there. They're quite interested in them. And then at the bottom, you've got markets like Singapore and, as you said, France and Italy.
Yeah, makes sense. So, you know, diet culture. It is tied into diet culture, isn't it? Because it's kind of trying to manage calories and, as you mentioned, you know, turning down the food noise in our brains, which I think everyone has, you know, naturally. Slight side note, and I'm sure we'll come on to this later, but I think it can also suppress other impulses. So I've heard people talking about it, suppressing it for other cravings like alcohol, cigarettes.
Like its use cases might
exactly. So like beyond food, it actually just suppresses desire, which I think is really, we could do a whole other episode on that, but let's put a pin in that for now. So yeah, I just want to talk quickly about, you know, why people are using them, because as I've said, I think it is very tied to diet culture and, you know, people who are using them for weight loss. Is it to look good? Is it to feel good? Is it I don't know. Is it for health reasons? Is it, you know, what's the kind of driver? What's the why behind it all?
The why. Okay, so the top 3 reasons that early adopters of weight loss jabs gave for using them were obviously losing weight, managing diabetes, and treating a weight-related health condition. But among those who are interested in using them, achieving lifestyle and aesthetic goals actually ranks in second place ahead of managing diabetes. So we can assume that maybe this next wave of users will see this more as like a lifestyle product rather than a medical treatment. And then it's also interesting when you look at who's using these weight loss jabs. It's not just, as you said, women wanting to count calories. Actually, although weight loss jabs has this very female face, that might just come down to how it's being talked about and marketed, because we actually found that in our early sample in 2025 of users, men made up 52% of that group.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, and some of the groups that really stand out for using them might surprise you, like people who play American football or basketball, tennis, etc., and who use the Nike Plus app or shop at places like Trader Joe's or Whole Foods.
Wow, and they're more likely to use it.
Yes.
Wow, that's so interesting. That actually made me think about, I don't know if you saw this, but Serena Williams did, I think it was an ad, and she was like, I'm going to ad-lib paraphrase this, but she basically was saying that you can be incredibly fit and still struggle with your weight. Like, they're not mutually exclusive. You know, just because you struggle with your weight doesn't mean that you aren't fit, right?
Yeah, for sure. I don't think being active actually takes the pressure off. I think if anything, it just raises the stakes. Weight affects like your performance and how comfortable you feel when you're exercising. Like, I mean, I've done pole fitness for a few years now, and you know, while the community is super welcoming, the reality is you're exercising in front of a mirror in short shorts for an hour, and it does occasionally get to you.
Yeah, that's so true. Like, what I do a lot of yoga, and I've actually moved from a yoga studio that had loads of mirrors on the wall to a yoga studio that has no mirrors on the wall. Not because of the mirrors, but because I just wanted to pay less for my subscription. But it is really interesting, like the idea of feeling like you look good whilst you're working out, I think has such a broader impact on how it feels to work out. Like, I think as a whole, like athleisure and the kind of fitness industry has maybe shifted, in my eyes, from, you know, looking good from feeling good to looking good. And there's actually, like, you know, you can get a whole kind of fashion line of, you know, these are my going to brunch leggings, and, you know, it's like, it's the kind of the lines between lifestyle and fitness have blurred, and so naturally the lines between looking good and feeling good have blurred, right?
Definitely. And I think, that does raise an interesting point as well. Like, these weight loss drugs aren't meant to be some magic bullet. They're meant to be a tool that you kind of integrate into your life. Like, among people who have used them, around half say they've lost weight, just slightly more than half. 35% say they've seen better physical health, which, don't get me wrong, is super high for a weight loss product,
It's really
right?
high, yeah, really
but it
high.
proves that it's not a guarantee. And I have read reports of people regaining the weight after coming off them. So I think from what I've read, people are advised to make lifestyle adjustments while using them, not just to, keep the results long term, but also to manage the side effects.
Yeah. And do we know from our data whether it's viewed more as a lifestyle product versus a medical product?
Yeah, so like I said, at the moment, those top 3 reasons are kind of health related, but I think the next wave of users, or the people interested in them, if they end up using them, I think that's when we'll start to see it shift. So I think at the moment, medical treatment, but I think over time,
definitely more life cycle. The talking about looking good, feeling good when exercising brings me back to the body positivity movement that we saw crop up, to be honest, 10 years ago, but I think it had a bit of a resurgence 5 years ago. But celebrities like Lizzo are, a perfect example of kind of celebrating all body types. I think we've seen fashion houses embrace different size mannequins and, which is something that you never would have seen before. And, people who from all walks of life who are really diverse, who all look different and celebrate their individuality. I think we've definitely started to see that. And actually, I know that it's something we've seen Gen Z push back on, as in the absence of body positivity in certain fashion houses. But I know that we saw a kind of change in the data from people, especially in the Gen Z cohort, who say that they diet to lose weight versus to feel healthy. So, historically, we need to go back and look at the data, but I think a millennial diet would always be to lose weight and to look good. But actually for Gen Zs, it's much more about how you feel and to kind of nourish your body, to feel better in your body and to, kind of do that. And that's actually, it ties into Nike's campaign where they flipped just do it to why do it, right? Like what is driving all of this motivation? And it's very much tied to feeling good and just feeling empowered, right? Rather than it's kind of external versus internal.
Like the journey versus the outcome.
100%. And what's driving you to do this thing, and maybe be a bit more self-serving with it. So I'm doing it for me, to feel good for me, or to express myself for me, rather than an external facing aesthetic or clout or, I don't know, praise or whatever. So yeah, it is really interesting. And I don't know if we have any data on Gen Z and versus other generations with weight loss jabs. Is that something that we can see?
Yeah, so I don't know if this does surprise you, but Gen Z are actually more likely to be interested in using weight loss jabs than Gen X and baby boomers, even though you think that older generations would be in more need of or might struggle a bit more with weight management.
Yeah, that's really interesting. In my head, Gen Z is still 12, so I don't want them to be on weight loss jabs. So do you think it's an age thing? Because, some might say that as you get older, I don't know, you care less. But I don't know if that's just an old wives' tale. But
no, that is actually data backed. We have one data point from ages ago that says I'm happy with how I look, and the older you are, the more likely you are to agree with it.
That's so interesting. Yeah. I wonder if you just kind of learn to let go of societal standards.
Less pressure.
Less pressure. Yeah. Also, not to be incredibly traditional and heteronormative, but I guess if you're younger, you're, from an evolutionary perspective, you're looking to mate, right? So you're worried about how you look, and wanting to be attractive is really important for both genders.
Once you're married, it doesn't matter.
Once you're married, let it go. It doesn't matter. You've bagged a man, you've bagged a woman, it's fine.
Yeah.
So we've talked a bit about generations. We've talked about, it kind of petering off for younger generations. This is kind of reminiscent of the protein trend that we saw a while ago, where kind of prioritizing getting protein, and we were seeing protein in water. We still are. Protein in water, cereal, literally everything. because people are wanting protein in their diets, and it definitely ties into exercise and, you know, wanting to resource your body as much as possible. So it's really interesting that some people might be seeing weight loss drugs as a way to help them achieve their fitness goals. Because I think it's all tied into, I do think there's probably a graph you could draw where you see these two lines kind of following the same trajectory of like the interest in protein and the weight loss jab stuff.
Yeah, and I think as well, people on Reddit and people in the media have been asking if Thin is back in.
Yeah.
But I mean, this is just my gut talking. I don't think it ever really went away. I think many of us swap talk of calorie counting, restriction, and scales for healthy language around, as you said, wellness and feeling good. But the end goal of looking lean and looking fit never truly disappeared. I think the body positivity movement reframed those conversations rather than completely rewrote them.
Yeah, that's actually so true. Like, I mean, I also think that maybe the instinctive, you know, in our minds, because of how we've, you know, the kind of media we've consumed growing up, it's always kind of been in the back of our minds that, what do you say, thin is in? Yeah. But I've actually seen, I can't remember who it was, but there was a brand recently that had models that were far too thin and their ads actually got pulled. So I do think it's like more taboo now to celebrate an extreme sense of thinness. And I definitely agree. I don't think it ever went away. I think it's always kind of been lurking, even if from the sidelines. But I think it's probably subdued and less in our faces now than it was, say, in 2005, where you literally had size 00 girls walking down the runway.
Right, yeah.
And, you know, kind of the Tumblr kind of movement of like thigh gaps and all of that. So you're right, because that was then like 10 years after the 2000s, and that very much has stayed. But I guess it's just less taboo, right? Or more taboo now, sorry, to talk about it in that way and to advocate for thinness.
Yeah, and I guess that's it. With Gen Z, they're kind of aware of the impact diet culture has had on them, and they in their head have branded it as toxic, but that doesn't mean they're completely closed off to new solutions that might make hitting those goals feel realistic or reasonable. So I think that's probably why they surprisingly are more interested in using weight loss jabs, despite the fact that they have this very unique take on diet culture that's very different to the one, you know, we might have grown up with.
Yeah. I want to talk about side effects.
Okay.
Big headlines. I've seen a few around surprise pregnancies and like dry mouth, and then also the one that I mentioned at the start of the episode where, you know, suppressing other impulses and controlling other kind of compulsive behaviors. So do you have any kind of idea around, you know, people's fear around the side effects or consumers' relationship to them?
We have some data around it. So, I mean, as you mentioned earlier, by medicine standard, these drugs are still fairly new, which means we don't have decades of data on them yet. So, and unfortunately, there will always be a small group of users who respond to a medicine in unexpected ways, whether that's weight loss jabs, vaccines, or something else. But on a top level, we can say that a fair few users are experiencing some unpleasantness. So when we asked, 18% of users had said they'd spotted negative side effects. And I read the early clinical trials show that users are experiencing some muscle loss as well as fat loss. So it's really up to healthcare companies and brands to help them navigate all of this and give them advice, especially as they start to come off weight loss jabs.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And actually, I wonder if the loss of muscle mass has anything to do with the fact that, like, if you're putting less fuel into your body, you are not going to be able to exercise as well as you used to, right? When you were kind of fueling with carbs and protein and all of this stuff. Like, it is an appetite suppressant, so you're naturally putting less in, so you can exert less energy when you're working out. So yeah, that's really interesting. And yeah, I don't know whether it's like an unknown side effect or whether people go on these weight loss jabs knowing that is going to be something that they face.
Yeah, maybe a bit more advice before they even go on it as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So do you think that there should be any kind of change in how kind of brands should market to these consumers. Like, I know that we have seen here in the UK that Greggs rolled out kind of smaller protein packed bakes designed for these customers, and Conagra Brands, which is an American CPG company, added like a little bit to their label that said GLP-1 friendly to its ready meals, which I think is just so interesting that we're already seeing the kind of this wave of consumerism tap into product lines so soon. But then we say that, we were saying, 2021 was when they kind of came into prominence. So it's actually not that, I mean, yeah, it's years ago now. So yeah, I wanted to ask you, like, because my hot take is that, as we said, we kind of need to support consumers on this journey, especially like, doctors and stuff, like giving full disclosure before, and like having plans that kind of pair alongside weight loss jabs, just to make sure that people know how to adapt their lifestyle to these different changes. I don't know if you agree. I don't know if you kind of, it's just, I would warn companies against rushing in and blindly kind of, jumping on this as a fad or as a trend.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there. I think, like it or not, people are taking these weight loss jabs, and they probably do need some support, whatever our kind of personal views on it are. But yeah, my thinking is that any tweaks to a brand's marketing or product strategy should really be guided by whether current or prospective users make up a good chunk of its customer base, and whether they can really offer something that will genuinely help people to adapt to life on or after weight loss jabs. I can give you some examples here around the people who are more likely to be using them. So users are more likely to have a mental health condition, to use meditation tools, to take part in online fitness classes, to want to take part in customer communities, to use food delivery services. I could go on, but as you can see, there are a lot of gaps.
Yeah.
It's just worth asking if a brand is genuinely built to fill one, or whether, as you said, they might just be chasing a trend.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, going back to the body positivity movement that we're talking about, you saw a lot of brands kind of try and jump on that bandwagon, and a lot of it came across as like inauthentic and fad-like, just opportunistic, right? They're trying to capitalize on a shift in consumer sentiment that is actually quite personal and actually quite, it's like not a brand's moment, right, to do that. So where do you think this is headed? Do you think more and more people will be taking weight loss jabs, or do you think it will peter out?
Ooh, that's a good question. So I think as far as trends go, this one does seem to be progressing quite quickly. Like, I read that the World Health Organization just added these weight loss jabs to its essentials medicine list. And here in the UK, GPs can now prescribe them. But I do suspect that this trend will have to kind of level off before it takes its next steps, as at the moment, supply isn't keeping up with demand, which is pushing prices up and a lot of people out of the market. And one idea that's been floated is that weight loss jabs could be the statin story all over again. So when statins first came out in the late 80s, they were expensive, they had notable side effects, and they were really just reserved for people who had really high cholesterol or who had already had a heart attack. But then over time, they got safer and cheaper, and then their use widened from treating heart disease to preventing it as well. So they went from being niche meds to some of the most prescribed drugs on the planet. And you can kind of see how weight loss jabs could potentially follow that path, especially given that oral GLP pills are already being discussed.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, my hot take is that I am just a bit worried about like the long-term side effects. And, we were saying how nascent the drug still is. I mean, it's obviously a completely different use case, and it's obviously not the same. But I would say it's comparable to vaping in the sense that, it's kind of fine now, but we don't know in 10 to 15 years. I mean, vaping is obviously not fine now, but in 10 to 15 years, what are the long-term effects of kind of ingesting these substances? Because we just don't know, because time is so important to seeing those long-term.
I think, as you're saying, like, yeah, it really depends on how it goes. Like, will they get more effective and safer over time, or will we actually see that long-term people aren't keeping the weight off, and as you say, more side effects come to light,
which is quite common, right? The kind of yo-yo effect of, you know, when you're on them you are losing the weight and that's fine, but then when you go off them your appetite returns to normal or returns to what it was before you went on the drugs. So there's a kind of a lifestyle maintenance part that's involved there that is kind of missed out of the process because you're not taking them anymore and you go back to the way that you were eating before. So I'm skeptical about the drugs as long-term benefit if it kind of offers short-term immediate relief in the sense of I've taken my jab this week and therefore my appetite is suppressed, because you will see appetite kind of increasing as the week goes on after you've taken your weekly jab. And so naturally, once you stop taking them, it will revert to how it was before. So yeah, I think with any diet, you know, because it's a way of dieting. It's very common to, you know, do a little Uno reverse and come back to, you know, what you were feeling before. So yeah, long term, I don't know, but I definitely think it's probably not going to slow down anytime soon.
No, I mean, based on the early signals as well, like I did read an article from the Financial Times saying that GLP-1 drugs may be responsible for the first drop in obesity rates in, I think, about a decade. And in our GWI USA data, we have also seen a drop in the number of people saying that they're either obese or overweight. It's only small, but like you say, those might be the people who are just kind of currently using them. So it depends on whether these are meant to be like a long-term solution or they're only meant to be taken for a short period. And then people, I guess it will depend on how they cope once they come off them.
Yeah. And I guess you could liken it to AI, right? Like when new things come in, consumers are kind of quite scared, quite skeptical, but then the right safeguarding tools are put in place and kind of people have the right parameters to have fun with the thing or, you know, learn how to use it to their benefit and learn how to use it in the way that they need to use it. And those safeguards kind of reduce anxiety and skepticism about the new technology. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see, and time will tell, to be honest.
I'm excited to see this trend unfold. It's going to be great to get more data on the specific side effects people have, and once, you know, life after people come off these drugs, which I'm assuming we'll be able to start collecting data on over the next couple of years.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining me. It was so good to dive into the topic. Appreciate your time.
You're so welcome. Thank you.
And thank you. If you like what you saw in this podcast, you can, of course, subscribe to our newsletter on The Dot. We send you weekly consumer insights every Wednesday, so please subscribe and also click the bell to always get notified when a new episode is out. Thanks. See you next time.